The night Caylee Anthony's world would unravel began like any other, quiet, deceptive, hiding a darkness that would shock an entire nation. Who was Caylee Anthony? A young mother with a smile that masked an unfathomable secret. 25 years old, beautiful, seemingly carefree, but beneath that surface something sinister was brewing. Her daughter Caylee, just 2 years old, had vanished. Not with a dramatic kidnapping, not with a violent struggle, but through a silence so profound it would become a national obsession. For 31 days, Caylee told no one her child was missing. She partied, she laughed, she lived as if nothing was wrong. While other mothers would be desperately searching, calling hospitals, posting missing posters, Caylee Anthony was dancing in nightclubs, getting tattoos that screamed Bella Vita, beautiful life. How could a mother forget her child? How could someone disconnect so completely from the most fundamental human connection, the bond between a parent and child? The first hint something was wrong came from Caylee's grandmother, Cindy. Her maternal instincts screamed that something was terribly off. When she finally confronted Caylee, the responses were bizarre. Elaborate lies about fictional nannies, imaginary work schedules, completely fabricated stories. Each lie was another layer of a complex psychological puzzle. Who was this woman? What could drive a mother to such extreme deception? The most terrifying question lingered. What really happened to little Caylee? The truth, when it would finally emerge, would be more shocking than anyone could imagine. A secret so dark, it would tear apart a family and captivate an entire nation. No one knew yet, but Caylee's disappearance was about to become the most watched mystery in modern American history. The Anthony family appeared normal from the outside. A typical middle-class suburban household with hidden fractures that would eventually shatter their entire existence. George Anthony, a former police officer, and Cindy, a nurse, seemed like dedicated parents. But beneath the surface, generations of secrets and dysfunction were brewing. Caylee, their daughter, had learned early that truth was malleable, a tool to be manipulated rather than honored. Family members would later testify to Caylee's extraordinary ability to lie. Not small lies, but elaborate, intricate narratives that could convince anyone. Her mother, Cindy, would describe her as a master storyteller, someone who could construct entire worlds of fiction with remarkable ease. The first signs of trouble emerged during Caylee's teenage years. She began creating elaborate stories about non-existent jobs, fictional boyfriends, and imaginary life experiences. Her family oscillated between frustration and concern, never understanding the psychological roots of her deception. When Caylee became pregnant at 19, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Caylee became the center of their world, and the source of their deepest tensions. Caylee's parents essentially became co-parents, helping raise the child while Caylee seemed perpetually detached. Psychological experts would later analyze Caylee's behavior as a complex manifestation of narcissistic tendencies. She craved freedom but resented the responsibilities of motherhood. Her social life became increasingly important, often at Caylee's expense. Friends described two distinct Caylees. One was a loving mother who appeared devoted to Caylee. The other was a party-seeking young woman who saw her child as an inconvenience. This duality would become crucial in understanding the tragedy that was about to unfold. The mounting inconsistencies in her stories became more pronounced. Caylee would claim she worked at Universal Studios, a lie so bold that when investigators eventually visited, she had no explanation. She invented elaborate stories about a nanny named Zenaida Gonzalez, who didn't exist. Her family watched helplessly as her web of lies grew more complex. Each confrontation was met with more fabrication, more emotional manipulation. Cindy and George found themselves trapped between loving their daughter and recognizing something was terribly wrong. As the days passed, the subtle warning signs became glaring red flags. Casey's ability to live her life without apparent concern for her missing daughter would become the most chilling aspect of the entire case. Something was very wrong in the Anthony household, and no one could have predicted how catastrophically wrong it would become. The investigation into Caylee Anthony's disappearance quickly became a complex psychological puzzle that would challenge every investigative protocol. Detectives first noticed something unusual: Casey's complete lack of emotional response. While most mothers would be hysterical, Caylee appeared calm, almost indifferent. Her repeated lies became the first major red flag for investigators. Forensic experts began piecing together a disturbing timeline. The most critical evidence emerged from Casey's abandoned car, a shocking detail that would become central to the case. Forensic specialists detected an unmistakable odor of decomposition, suggesting something catastrophic had occurred. The car trunk became a critical piece of physical evidence. Trace amounts of chloroform were discovered, raising suspicions about potential intentional harm. Computer searches revealing chloroform research added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Witnesses provided conflicting testimonies that further complicated the case. Casey's friends described her as a devoted mother, while her own family seemed increasingly suspicious. Each interview revealed another layer of deception. Forensic anthropologists meticulously analyzed the skeletal remains found near the Anthony home. Their initial findings suggested a deliberate attempt to conceal a death. The placement of duct tape on the remains raised more questions than answers. Psychological profilers began constructing Casey's mental landscape. They discovered a pattern of pathological lying that predated Caylee's disappearance. Her ability to fabricate elaborate stories became a key investigative focus. The tension between family loyalty and truth became increasingly apparent. George and Cindy Anthony found themselves torn between protecting their daughter and uncovering the truth about their granddaughter's fate. Unexpected twists continued to emerge. A meter reader who discovered the remains became a potential witness, adding another layer of complexity to the investigation. His testimony would prove crucial in understanding the case's timeline. Forensic experts presented conflicting interpretations of the evidence. Some argued the evidence suggested premeditated murder, while others saw potential alternative explanations. This scientific disagreement would become a critical aspect of the eventual trial. The investigation revealed a disturbing portrait of a young woman capable of extraordinary deception. Each piece of evidence painted a more complicated picture of Caylee Anthony, a mother whose actions defied conventional understanding of maternal instinct. As the investigation progressed, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary missing child case. Something far more sinister was waiting to be uncovered. The courtroom became a pressure cooker of raw emotions and legal strategy when Caylee Anthony's murder trial began. Prosecutor Jeff Ashton approached the case with unprecedented determination. He believed he had an ironclad case that would definitively prove Caylee's guilt in her daughter's death. The prosecution's strategy centered on creating a narrative of a mother who chose her freedom over her child's life. Defense attorney Jose Baez took a revolutionary approach. Instead of denying Caylee's suspicious behavior, he would attack the very foundation of the prosecution's case. His opening statement would shock the entire courtroom, suggesting that Caylee had actually died in an accidental drowning, and that the entire case was built on circumstantial evidence. The first dramatic confrontation came when George Anthony took the stand. The prosecution hoped he would provide devastating testimony against his daughter. Instead, the defense transformed him into a potential suspect, suggesting he might have been responsible for Caylee's death. Forensic experts presented conflicting testimony that muddied the waters. Evidence of chloroform in the car trunk, computer searches about chloroform, and the mysterious smell of decomposition. Each piece of evidence became a battlefield of interpretation. Public perception ran dramatically different from the legal proceedings. Outside the courthouse, protesters demanded justice for Caylee. Social media exploded with theories and condemnations. But inside the courtroom, the legal reality was far more nuanced. The most shocking moment came when Baez introduced an unexpected narrative, alleging sexual abuse within the Anthony family. This strategic bombshell challenged everything the prosecution believed about the case. Caylee Anthony herself remained an enigma. Her demeanor was controlled, almost detached. She showed no visible emotion during testimonies that discussed her daughter's potential death. This psychological performance became itself a point of speculation. Forensic psychologists testified about Casey's pattern of lying, creating a portrait of a woman capable of extraordinary deception. Each witness seemed to peel back another layer of a complex psychological puzzle. The prosecution's case, which initially seemed overwhelming, began to show significant cracks. Reasonable doubt, the critical legal standard, started to emerge. As the trial progressed, it became clear this was no ordinary murder case. It was a battle of narratives, where the truth seemed increasingly elusive. The jury would soon face an impossible decision that would captivate an entire nation. When the verdict was announced, America collectively held its breath. Not guilty. Those two words would change everything. The courtroom erupted. Some spectators gasped, others wept. Most sat in stunned silence. Caylee Anthony stood emotionless, her fate dramatically altered in mere moments. The public reaction was immediate and visceral. Social media exploded with rage and disbelief. Millions felt that justice for little Caylee had been denied. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding pictures of the innocent child whose life had been cut short. Legal experts were divided. Some argued the prosecution overreached by seeking first-degree murder, while others believed critical evidence had been mishandled. The reasonable doubt standard had ultimately protected Caylee. Psychological experts analyzed the case extensively. How could a mother potentially responsible for her child's death walk free? The case exposed deep fractures in the legal system and public understanding of criminal justice. The Anthony family fractured further. George and Cindy's relationship with Caylee became irreparably damaged. Their grief and confusion transformed into a complex emotional landscape of anger, love, and profound loss. Caylee herself became a pariah. She would struggle to reintegrate into society, forever branded by public perception regardless of the legal outcome. The most haunting question remained. What really happened to Caylee? Years would pass, but the case never truly concluded. It became a permanent scar on the American consciousness, a mystery that would continue to provoke discussion, speculation, and heartache. Some mysteries, it seemed, would never find resolution.